Hello, sir.
Hello, Raja sir.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Hope the summer is treating you good.
Yeah, it is. It is extremely hot outside, but fortunately inside it's a little cool. So that's
Better.
how we are able to manage.
Hope the podcast will be as cooler as this room.
Yes.
So the topic of this podcast is onion.
Okay.
Okay. So to start with, almost 10 days back, the government has removed ban it has imposed on export of onions. Though the ban has been revoked, there are some export restrictions which are still in place. For example, minimum export price. So minimum export price is around $550 per metric ton, and export duty as well, around 40%. So the ban which has been imposed might have been revoked, but still there are export restrictions which are still in place. Okay, so virtually making onion export even impossible at this time. So before getting into the justifications and other stuff, let us first understand what made the government impose the ban on export of onions in the first place in the month of December 2023. I mean, so we always say that exports are good for the economy. So they attract forex reserves, and also increasing export is one of the strategy to improve the farmers' income. So this export ban sounds a bit counterintuitive. So how do we justify this?
Okay. With respect to the recent ban on export of onions, I guess there are broadly two reasons. One is the economic reason, and the other one is the political reason. So let me first elaborate on the economic reason first. As rightly pointed out by you, the first time the ban on export of onions was put on December 8th, 2023.
Yes.
To understand why the ban was put in the first place and why the restrictions to a certain extent have been eased, let's go back to December. In December, if you see, the onion prices had skyrocketed, such that if you look at the CPI inflation for November 2023 was actually higher side at almost around 5.5%.
Okay. Which is within the target fixed by the monetary policy
Yeah,
framework.
it is within the target of 4 to 6%.
Yes.
But the problem there was CPI, food inflation, which is measuring the inflation in particularly in food and
items.
beverages category. That CPI food inflation was on the higher side of almost around 8%.
Okay.
And the major factor which was driving the CPI food inflation was actually the onion prices. So it is being said that the prices of onion in November 2023 was 75% higher, a whopping 75% higher as compared to October 2023.
Which means 75% increase in the price within a month of.
Yes, just within a month, a large scale increase in prices of onion.
Okay.
So as the prices of onion increases, you must understand onion finds in its use in almost each and every food product that we prepare.
Yes, it finds on every plate.
Yes, exactly. So as the onion prices increase, the prices of thali also increases. So CPI, as you know, is published by National Statistical Office. Similar to that, CRISIL,
The rating agency.
the rating agency, also captures the changes in the prices of veg thali and the non-veg thali. And because the prices of onion had increased, the prices of thali, as highlighted by CRISIL, had also increased both for veg as well as non-veg. So economically, if you see, the food inflation was on the higher side in December 2023. So that is why the first time the ban was put. As to why the government eased the restrictions in May is because the CPI inflation in April has actually now got reduced. So government thought that this is the right time where, to a certain extent, the restrictions with respect to the export of onions can be eased. So this is mainly the economic reason, as you can understand. Second and more important is the political reason. So we know that general elections were around the corner when the government imposed the ban on export of onion, right? And it is being said that onion is not just a agriculture commodity, onion is also a political commodity. I do remember that Indira Gandhi, way back in 1970s, she went on to call Indian elections as onion elections.
Which means elections are fought on the issues of onion prices.
Exactly. So it's like the fortunes of the ruling party change with the changes in the prices of onions.
Okay.
So obviously government did not want to take a risk by keeping the onion prices higher. So government thought to bring down the onion prices just before the general elections start, so that that goodwill is maintained among the people as well.
Okay.
Adding to this, I just want to add two funny incidents which has happened with respect to the economic history of India on the onion. There was one particular incident wherein way back in 1970s, I don't remember the actual year. That time, one of the Rajya Sabha MP, he entered Rajya Sabha by wearing a garland of onions
As a show of protest.
as a show of protest. And it so happened that the then chairperson of Rajya Sabha asked the same Rajya Sabha MP, what would you do if the prices of shoes increase? Would you do the same thing? So that was very funny incident which happened with respect to onion. The second funny incident is a very famous comedian, Mr. Jaspal Bhatti.
Yes.
So what he did is he entered into agriculture market. He was flanked by black cat commandos. And when people asked him as to why have you come up with black cat commandos to agriculture market,
Don't tell
he
me
said,
that he went to purchase onions.
yes, he went to purchase onions. So in a way, he was like showing to the people that onion has
How
become
valuable
as
the onion
precious
is.
as probably gold in that time.
Yes, that's a good satire.
Yeah.
So, the great thalunomics that you just described justified the ban on export of onions.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, the political pressures as well.
Yeah.
Of course, especially when the elections around the corner.
Yeah.
The government does not want to embarrass itself and
True.
face any backlash from the consumers.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But again, how far can we justify these frequent bans on agricultural products? See, I'm not just talking about the onion. If you go back into the history, in the same year, 2023, India has banned export of basmati rice and non-basmati broken rice as well.
Yeah.
And before that, similar bans were imposed on sugar.
Yes.
If you remember, in the year 2022, during the Russia-Ukraine crisis, India has imposed ban on wheat exports as well.
Yeah.
See, these frequent bans are denying an opportunity for the farmer to take advantage of the rising prices in the global market. So, I agree, there are some economic considerations from the consumer point of view. There are some political pressures or political imperatives if the onion prices are going to be raised. So, government has every right to and every duty to control them. But on the other hand, we have to take care of the farmers' interest as well. So, how far can we justify these frequent bans?
With respect to ban on export of any commodity for that matter, there's no need to paint ban on export of any agriculture commodity as completely black and white. That is good or
Either good
bad.
or bad, okay.
It may change depending upon the particular circumstances. Let me put some arguments in favor as to why sometimes bans might be needed. Ban on export. Okay. Number one, let's talk about the OPEC countries.
The block which controls the oil supply.
Exactly.
So that it can control the price in the market.
Exactly.
Okay.
So think of it, what OPEC country does. In a way, it is trying to control the international crude oil prices, right?
Yes.
So if suddenly the international crude oil prices drop, if the prices drop, they will not be able to make more profit. So what they decide to do, they will reduce the production deliberately. By reducing the production, they are reducing the supply of international crude oil. as the prices of international crude oil increases because of decrease in supply, they can make more profit. So in a way, the OPEC countries are, making certain conditions conducive which can enable them to make profit.
So they're taking advantage of their
Their
production,
strength, their
Okay.
strength. So when you look at India, right? India is the largest exporter of rice.
Okay.
It is the
Yes.
second largest exporter of wheat.
Yes.
So sometimes, just like OPEC country, what it does, sometimes India, by limiting our exports, we can control the international prices of the agriculture commodities, and this can actually benefit the farmers in India.
Okay.
So probably in the short run, the farmers might incur a loss, but in the medium to long run, the farmers might actually get the benefit.
So by controlling the supply in the global market, we can actually earn the same kind of forex reserves with less quantity of exports.
Exactly. So because the prices would have increased by then, right?
Okay.
So it is not necessary to always paint ban on export as black and white. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Second thing to add here, I think our domestic interest should also be taken into consideration.
Yes.
For example, we need to have sufficient buffer stock of food grains to meet our food security norms,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, it has so happened that the buffer stock of wheat in India, latest data that we have, it has dropped down to almost 16-year low, lowest in the last 16 years.
Okay.
So when our buffer stock is less, when we are not having sufficient amount of wheat, I don't think it makes a sense to export wheat to other countries, because for us, our consumers, our buffer stock, I guess, is more important than catering to the global market. So our domestic interests must also be taken into consideration.
Yes, we have to take care of our food security needs as well.
Exactly.
Before catering to the global market and take advantage of it.
Yes.
Perfect. I believe that, apart from these economic and political interest, I just came to understand that export bans can also be used to achieve some environmental and ecological goals as well. For example, if you see, as we have discussed, India is the largest exporter of rice and the second largest exporter of wheat. Rice and wheat being most water intensive crops, we are indirectly exporting water.
Yeah.
Okay. So by putting export restrictions, in the longer run, we end up disincentivizing the farmers from growing such crops and go for crop diversification.
True.
So
Yeah.
that can be also achieved.
Yeah. So adding to whatever you said, I think the same point was highlighted by Economic Survey 2 to 3 years back. What Economic Survey showed us is, if you look at the basket of agriculture commodities that we are actually exporting, our basket of agriculture commodities has come to be dominated by basmati rice.
Yes.
And basmati rice, as you know, is more water intensive. So in a way, we have become a exporter of virtual water.
Yes.
Export of virtual water means we are exporting agriculture commodities which actually need more amount of water. And just compare that with China. China is very clever in this particular way. Okay. What China has done, China is actually one of the largest exporter of goods, but it is actually a importer of virtual water.
Okay.
The reason is China basically exports agriculture commodities such as fruits and vegetables, which are far more remunerative and less water intensive. So when you look at China, China is a exporter of goods and importer of water, which is completely in contrast with India. India is a importer of goods and an exporter of water. The irony of the fact is, India is actually facing water crisis.
True.
In spite of facing water crisis, it's like we are exporting water intensive crops.
So in a way, Chinese export policies are balancing both the environmental and economical needs of their country.
Yes.
But we are not able to strike that balance as good as China has been doing. China has been doing it. Fine. Okay. There are some economic needs, political needs, and environmental aspect to these export policies. So export bans can be justified on all these grounds. But what I believe is that our export ban and export restrictions should not be ad hoc. Just to remind you one thing, that in the year 2023, the government, in the month of May, I guess, the government has come out with a press note expressing its intent to explore new markets for its wheat exports.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, you won't believe, the very next day, government imposed ban on wheat exports.
True.
What kind of message the government has been, giving it to the farmers?
True.
Every time the government imposed a ban on exports, it sounds like it was a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Rather than a long-term strategic, they're trying to achieve a long-term strategic objective.
Yeah.
So I believe that, the export policies should be long-term and sustainable. So what do you say on this?
Yeah. So like I said, I don't find a problem with respect to restriction on exports. The problem is how and when are you imposing the restrictions.
True.
The restriction on export becomes problem if it is more reactionary.
Yes.
And if it is more ad hoc, right? Yes. Now, for example, let me just elaborate as to how restriction on export of agriculture commodities may actually go against the interests of farmer, our agriculture, as well as economy.
Economy as a whole.
Economy as a whole.
Okay.
Let's start with farmers,
Okay.
right? So, you must be knowing the Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income, Dalwai panel.
Yes.
The Dalwai panel had come up with 3-pronged strategy to double the farmers' income, which included 1, reducing input cost, 2nd, enhancing productivity of the agriculture field, and 3rd, getting the right prices for our farmers, right? So if you want our farmers to get the best price, I think we have to provide a much wider market access to our farmers. The market for our farmers should not be confined to just our domestic market. It should be the global market.
Okay.
Taking an analogy from China, right? So you have a lot of manufacturers in China. So China is, as you know, it's a global manufacturing hub.
Yes.
It is not just a global manufacturing hub. China is also a global exporter. So a manufacturer in China is not just catering to the domestic demand of China, but a manufacturer is catering to the global demand.
Yes.
So if a manufacturer in China is able to cater to domestic and global demand, they are able to earn more income. Don't you think the same thing should happen for our farmers as well? Our farmers should get a much wider access.
Of course. So the China's economic model is based on export-led growth model.
Export-led. So I guess this is something which we can have for agriculture.
Okay.
Right? So this is how the farmers have got affected.
Yes.
Second is how it is affecting our agriculture sector as a whole. I remember just around 2 to 3 years back, the economic survey had pointed out a phenomena that we are witnessing in Indian agriculture with respect to pulses. This phenomena is interestingly called as cobweb phenomena.
Okay.
What actually happens in cobweb phenomena is there is a particular year. In that particular year, let's say there is a surplus production of pulses.
Okay.
Surplus production of pulses such that supply is more than the demand. Immediately in that particular year, the prices of pulses will fall. As the price of pulses will fall, farmers will not be able to make adequate amount of profits.
Okay.
Immediately what next season farmers think is, last season they did not get much money from growing of pulses. Next season, most of the farmers will not grow pulses.
That crop. Okay.
If they are not growing pulses, immediately next season, the problem gets reversed where the demand for pulses is more than its supply. And there will be exceptional price rise in pulses. And whenever the exceptional price rise take place, what will happen? The farmers will think, okay, next season, let me grow pulses.
Okay.
So this is becoming a kind of...
So there has been a counter-cyclical trend with respect to the production and supply.
Yeah, counter-cyclical trend. What I'm afraid is, if this cobweb phenomena can happen in pulses, Why is it happening? It's because of price volatility in
Yes,
pulses, right?
yes.
If that price volatility in pulses is leading to cobweb phenomena, the same price volatility in onions can also lead to cobweb phenomena.
Okay, it can happen to any other good.
Any other agricultural commodity, think of tomato. 4 months back, the price of 1 kg of tomato had skyrocketed to almost around 200 rupees per kg. But then it so happened immediately within 1 month, the prices of tomato crashed to such a low level that the farmers started throwing the tomato on the roads
Yes.
because they could not even incur the transportation cost of transporting the tomato to the mandis. So the large scale volatility will obviously lead to cobweb phenomena. So think of it, if we frequently put a ban on export, then in that particular case, price volatility will increase, and as the price volatility increases, it leads to cobweb phenomena.
And also India can never become a reliable supplier, and India has to lose out its captive markets to some other countries.
True. So that is the third point which I was saying to you about economy as a whole.
Okay.
What happens here? Look at China. China is the largest the largest manufacturer of goods. Being a largest manufacturer, it is also a largest exporter.
Yes.
Think of India. India occupies probably the first place or the second place with respect to production of all the major agricultural commodities.
Yes. Yes.
Rice, wheat, pulses,
Including
noodles
milk.
yes. So India occupies either the first place or the second place with respect to production,
Yes.
which is very good. The problem is India's share in the global export of agricultural commodities is extremely low at just 2%.
Okay.
And India's ranking as an exporter of agricultural commodity is at 9th place.
Despite being the largest producer of many goods.
So think of it, first or second rank in terms of production. But the 9th rank in terms of exports. So we have not been able to capitalize on our exports. And government last time, 2018, it has come up with the agriculture export policy where it seeks to double agriculture exports from $30 billion to $60 billion. 2 years back, I guess, we had reached a target of $50 billion with respect to agriculture exports. But we did not meet the target of doubling agriculture exports. So frequent ban on exports will obviously hurt our exports as well.
So we are clear that the frequent bans and the ad hocism in terms of export bans has definitely taken its toll on agriculture exports potential.
Yes.
Fine. So obviously the natural, it pitches for a strong case for coming up with an export policy, export ban policy especially. It should not be arbitrary. It should be based on some kind of formula where there are some trigger points which can be used whenever the trigger points are invoked. You can start imposing export ban on such goods. What can be such trigger points? What can be that formula if I ask you?
I think to know the trigger point as to when we can put a restriction on export of commodities, I think we have a very good example from the 3 farm laws which the government had earlier passed.
Which were revoked later on.
Which were obviously revoked later on because of the political pressure. There was one particular farm law which missed everyone's attention, and that farm law was amendment to the Essential Commodities Act 1955. Everyone focused on the first 2 farm laws about opening up the agriculture market, but probably less amount of focus was given on the amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. The amendment to the Essential Commodities Act 1955 stated that stock holding restrictions would be imposed only in case of exceptional price rise of agricultural commodities. For example, it was mentioned that only when the prices of fruits and vegetables increase by 100%.
Which means only when the prices are doubled.
Only
then the government is going to impose stock holding norms.
Stock holding restrictions will be imposed. So when we have a objective criteria or a trigger point, as you mentioned, that kind of objective criteria, a kind of trigger point, I guess it gives a lot of clarity to all the stakeholders who are involved.
Yes, including traders and farmers.
Yeah, traders, farmers, everyone will have a clarity. Otherwise, the restriction on exports, right, it has become more of a knee-jerk reaction as an ad hoc. It's more of a firefighting exercise.
Okay. So, to do that, let's say government needs to have robust production estimates. Without robust production estimates, we can never achieve long-term or a formula-based
True.
export ban policy. Okay. So, for example, we often hear that government fails to estimate the right production of wheat, rice, and all of a sudden they realize that the production is much lesser than what they have conceived earlier, and all of a sudden they start imposing ban. So, production estimate is also one of the key aspect for a long-term strategic export policy.
True. I think one of the most important lacunae that we are having is lack of production estimates. The problem with the government's policy sometimes is we try to build buffer stock when actually there's a shortage of production. That's the biggest problem.
Yes.
We cannot afford, or we should not build buffer stock when there's a production. Buffer stock has to be built when there is a surplus. So, as rightly pointed out by you, I think we need to have that future production estimates. And based upon that future production estimates, our buffer stock policy should be more dynamic in nature.
Yes.
Dynamic in what way? Think of it. Next season, we are estimating that the production is likely to fall. If next season the production is likely to fall, I think this season the government should procure more, build more buffer stock,
Yes.
so that the need to buy more food grains in the next season when there's actually a shortage, the need should not arise in the first place.
Okay.
That is a problem which has been happening with respect to wheat.
Yes.
In fact, what the government has been asking the traders here is, government has been asking traders to stay away from wheat procurement,
Okay.
so that it is able to procure wheat for
Procure
itself to maintain the buffer stock. This is against the basic policy of the government.
Okay. See, we know that the government has to procure, and there's nothing wrong in government procuring and maintaining huge buffer stocks.
Yeah.
But as you said, it should be confined to those seasons where there is surplus production.
True.
But not to those seasons where there is already dearth in the production and there is dearth of the commodity in the market.
Exactly.
And government intervention should be confined to surplus season. Fair enough. Government, of course, has to procure it for its monthly PDS requirements,
Yeah.
especially after the launch of Pradhan Mantri
Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana.
And also for non-PDS population, we have open market sales scheme to reduce the price volatility in the market.
Yeah.
Okay. For again, procurement for PDS requirements cannot be questioned on any grounds, because we have food security needs and we have 80 crores of the population to feed. But for other consumer center, if government has to procure huge stocks so that it has to reduce the price volatility in the market, I think that is where government has to impose some self-restraint, and rather than it has to come up with other instruments. For example, to give you an example, price stabilization fund. I believe price stabilization fund would be a better instrument in controlling the prices of those agricultural goods which witness huge volatility in the market, rather than government procuring them and releasing them whenever there is a need to control the price volatility.
Yeah. So I think price stabilization fund is a very good scheme, at least on paper.
Okay.
So what the price stabilization fund basically does is it is trying to control volatility in three commodities, which is onion, potato, and pulses.
Yes.
And the procurement policy under the price stabilization fund is dynamic, which changes as per the requirement. So it's like saying if there's a surplus production of these three commodities, during surplus production, we will undertake procurement, build a buffer stock, so that we are able to protect the interests of the farmers, because the farmers otherwise will have to undertake distress sale. And later, if at all there is a shortage of agriculture commodities, and if there is exceptional price rise, to protect the interests of consumers, the government can liquidate the buffer stock which it has procured under price stabilization fund. Nothing wrong. Perfectly good. but I'll tell you the problem with price stabilization fund. According to the media sources, Mint, according to Mint, it has highlighted that in the year 22-23, out of 1,500 crores allocated to price stabilization fund, not a single paisa was spent.
Not a single rupee.
Not a single rupee was spent under price stabilization fund in the year 22-23.
Interesting.
Next year, 23-24, only a token amount of just 1 lakh
1 lakh rupees.
for a country as big as India.
Which is not even sufficient to procure 1 metric ton of pulses.
Yes, this is the amount that we allocated under price stabilization fund.
Okay.
But good thing is now the budget allocation for PSF, price stabilization fund, has got increased to once again 1,500 crores. But I don't find a problem there because budget allocation was there before also. Now also I think what is needed is active implementation. Second thing is they have decided to bring even rice and wheat under price stabilization fund.
So expanding the scope of price stabilization fund.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I say is, why should it be limited to just these 5 commodities?
Okay, it can be.
It can be expanded to other agriculture commodities. Any agriculture commodity which is facing large scale volatility, if its prices increased, if it is hurting the consumers, liquidate the buffer stock. If its price has got reduced, if it is affecting the farmers, procure the agriculture commodities, benefit the farmers. So I think it has to be more dynamic that way.
So that way we can balance both the consumer's interest and farmer's interest.
Yes.
Talking about consumer's interest and farmer's interest, I'll have to bring it to you. There has been an argument which says that India's export policies and export restrictions always tilted towards the consumer's interest and leaving the farmers in the lurch. So the obvious doubt is that, is there a conflict of interest between consumer's interest and farmer's interest?
Not as long as the government export restrictions are ad hoc and reactionary.
Okay.
The problem is the government's policy, especially with respect to onions, rice, wheat. I guess it is more of firefighting exercise rather than a fireproofing exercise. We are reacting to a situation. We are not prepared to handle that situation. As long as our export policies are reactionary, as long as they are ad hoc, knee-jerk, obviously there will be a kind of trade-off. You can either protect the interests of the farmers or you can protect the interests of the consumers. Yes. You cannot take them together. But that is true as long as the policies are knee-jerk and ad hoc. I think if you have a very stable, consistent policy, you can take the interests of both the two stakeholders together. For example, I remember the government has come up with a beautiful concept of Bharat brand.
Okay.
Bharat brand of rice, Bharat Atta,
yes.
Right? And what the government is doing through this particular Bharat common brand is, whenever the prices of any of the agriculture commodities such as rice, atta, tur dal, if they are increasing, then the government is selling these agriculture commodities to the consumers at a lower price. These commodities may have been procured by the government when, the surplus, then they were in surplus, thus benefiting the farmers, and they're liquidating it when
they can sell in the
market for the benefit of consumers.
Under the government's Bharat brand.
Yes.
And there are other ways we can actually balance consumers' interest and farmers' interest, in my opinion, is that by reducing the cost of cultivation.
Yes.
I think it should be the long-lasting objective of the government, because if you ultimately reduce the cost of the cultivation, it not only ensures good margin for the farmer, and also CPI, the food inflation, will also eventually come down.
Yes.
So for that, I think government has to invest more on marketing infrastructure.
True.
And transport infrastructure.
True.
And we always say that liberalize the market. For God's sake, it is high time that we have to liberalize the market from the clutches of government's monopoly.
True.
So probably I think these objectives, these reforms are going
I think it's as rightly pointed out, I think it being said, when you look at agriculture, we have made rapid strides in agriculture with respect to reducing input costs for the farmer.
Okay.
Like we have come up with access to cheaper credit. We have come up with PM Kisan, right? So we have done rapid strides as far as inputs is concerned.
Fertilizer subsidies as
Fertilizer
well.
subsidy.
Electricity subsidy.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have made rapid strides as far as the production is concerned, the productivity is concerned. The only point which is missing is marketing. In last, I would say, 7 to 8 years, the only major reform with respect to marketing, which has a potential to help the farmers, is only the ENAM.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the government came up with farm laws, but because of the political pressure, they had to be revoked. I think a lot of committees have actually argued in the favor of farm laws. I'm not saying that the farm laws are perfect. There could be 1 or 2 mistakes or 1 or 2 problems in the farm laws, but which can well be addressed.
At least not bad for a start.
Yes, exactly. So even the Supreme Court appointed committee on farm laws has actually gone on to say that revoking farm laws has gone against the silent majority of farmers. And that silent majority is a whopping 85%. It's like
small and marginal farmers.
Yes, 85% of farmers were actually silent majority. They did not, they are not vociferous enough in, promoting their cause. Ki yes, let's go ahead with the farm laws.
Okay.
It's remaining only 15% of the farmers which are actually protesting against the farm laws.
Okay. I mean, especially when the elections are around the corner, I think nobody has that guts to talk about farm laws again.
Yeah.
Okay. Hoping that state governments come on board and implement ENAM as efficiently as possible, and let's hope that the ENAM is going to become really a single agriculture market across India, because now that the first focus is only to integrate the markets within the state government.
True.
And slowly integrate across the states as well. So I think let's hope the states are going to be achieved.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your expert opinion, sir. It was a great.
It was very nice. Thank you talking to you, Raja sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.